Ever catch yourself, kind of wondering what makes some relationships really tick? Like not just survive, but actually thrive. Or maybe you're puzzled by why some just, well, fall apart.
It's a question that's fascinated people for, well, forever, probably.
Right. So today we are going deep, deep into the work of someone who's spent a lifetime trying to figure this out, John Gottman. Specifically, his book, What Predicts Divorce.
Yeah, this guy, he didn't just sit around thinking about relationships. Gottman and his team, they got their hands dirty. They observed real couples in the lab for years.
The Love Lab, right. I've heard about this.
Exactly. They recorded everything. Conversations, heart rates, even facial expressions, all the little details.
Wow. So we're talking decades of research, mountains of data. Our deep dive today is like, your cheat sheet to all that.
A fast track to the core insights, you could say. What really makes a marriage work, and yeah, what can doom it.
We're going to break it down, make it clear without all the academic jargon.
And what's really striking is how consistent Gottman's findings are. Across all these studies, years of work, the same patterns emerge.
It's science, not just someone's opinion, right?
Exactly. Solid science.
Okay, let's jump into one of Gottman's most famous ideas, which has a pretty dramatic name, the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
Yeah. Sounds intense, doesn't it?
It does. But basically, these are four communication styles, negative ones that are like huge red flags. They predict divorce really, really well.
And it's not just having a bad day. These are signs of deeper problems, how couples see and treat each other. The first horseman is criticism.
Okay, so we all complain sometimes, right? But this is different.
It is. Criticism attacks the person, their character,
Yeah.
not just a specific behavior, like saying, you're always late, instead of, hey, I was worried when you were late for dinner tonight.
Right, so it's not about the laundry not being folded. It's you're a slob, you never help.
Exactly. That's a direct hit on who they are, not what they did.
Yeah.
And from there, well, things can go downhill fast.
Makes sense. And I guess this kind of sets the stage for the next horseman.
It often does. Contempt. This one's the worst. Really toxic.
Yeah.
It's not just disliking something your partner did. It's feeling superior to them, looking down on them.
Ouch. Like, what specific?
Think sarcasm, but mean-spirited. Mocking them, rolling your eyes like they're stupid. Insults. Anything that says, I'm better than you.
Man, even seeing that in other people is rough.
Imagine being on the receiving end of that all the time.
It just destroys connection, respect, everything.
It does. And it can even impact physical health, surprisingly.
Yeah.
Gottman found a link there.
Wow, seriously.
Yeah. Now, horseman number 3 is defensiveness. This often pops up as a reaction to criticism.
Like a shield going up.
Exactly. Instead of, owning up to their part, the defensive person makes excuses, blames the other person, anything to avoid responsibility.
The blame game.
Yeah.
It's always the other person's fault.
Right. So the issue never gets resolved, and the fight just keeps escalating. And finally, there's stonewalling. This one often shows up later in the relationship when one person is just set up with the negativity.
They've had enough.
They shut down, they withdraw emotionally, don't respond, maybe avoid eye contact, like they're not even there.
Present physically, but gone mentally and emotionally.
Yeah. And while it might seem like they're preventing more conflict, it actually just makes things worse. The other person feels totally unheard, abandoned.
Like talking to a brick wall.
And what's interesting is these horsemen, they often feed each other. One leads to another, then another. It becomes a cycle of negativity that's hard to break.
Or a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears a bit. Gottman also talks about something more positive, the emotional bank account.
Oh, this one's great. I love this analogy.
Me too. It's so clear. Your relationship is like a bank account. Positive things you do, those are deposits.
Right. Like acts of kindness, telling your partner you appreciate them, showing affection, just listening when they need to talk. All those add up.
And negative stuff, that's withdrawals.
The four horsemen, obviously. Unresolved arguments, breaking promises, all those chip away at the balance.
And just like with money, you need a positive balance to be healthy, to handle those inevitable withdrawals.
Exactly. A little disagreement won't destroy you if you've got lots of good stuff built up.
So it's the small, everyday things that matter most.
They really do. It's not always about the grand gestures. A hug, a question about their day, putting your phone down, and truly listening, these are the deposits that keep a relationship strong.
Makes you think, right? It's not always about the big romantic moments. It's the constant small acts of love.
Exactly. And speaking of those small moments, Gottman also talks about bids for connection.
Okay, what are those?
Basically, any attempt to engage with your partner, to connect, in some way.
Like what? Give me an example.
It could be verbal, like, hey, look at this funny article, or how is your day, honey?
Or just like a look.
Yeah, nonverbal too. A touch, a smile, a playful gesture, anything that says, hey, I want to connect with you.
And it's how the other person responds that matters, right?
Huge. Gottman talks about turning toward, turning away, and turning against.
Okay, break those down for me.
Turning toward is responding positively, even if it's small.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, cool article, let me see. Turning away
Mm-hmm.
is ignoring the bid.
Ouch.
Yeah, like you're not interested. And turning against is a negative response, maybe with sarcasm or anger.
So even little things like looking up from your phone when your partner speaks, that's a turn toward.
It is, and it matters. Couples who consistently turn toward each other are way happier.
Wow, so powerful. Those little moments build up over time.
Absolutely. And this leads us to another big finding, the magic ratio.
I've heard of this. Isn't this about like how many good interactions versus bad ones you need?
It is. Gottman found that stable, happy marriages have a ratio of 5 to 1. For every negative interaction, there need to be at least 5 positive ones.
5 to 1, got it. But happy couples still argue, right?
Of course, that's normal. But even during a disagreement, they maintain that positive balance. Maybe they use humor to lighten things up, or show affection, or try to understand each other's point of view.
So it's not about avoiding conflict. It's about how you handle it. That 5 to 1 ratio is a good thing to keep in mind.
It is. And now let's get into something a bit more intense. Gottman's research also looked at what happens in our bodies during arguments.
Like heart rate and stuff.
Yeah, the physiological side.
Yeah.
He found that when arguments get really heated, or when those 4 horsemen are present, people experience what he calls flooding.
Flooding. Okay, I'm intrigued. What's that?
It's like fight or flight, but in an argument. When someone feels attacked or overwhelmed, their body goes into this state of high alert. Their heart races, stress hormones surge, and they can't think straight.
So they're literally flooded with emotions.
Yeah, rational thought goes out the window.
And I bet this is when stonewalling happens a lot.
You got it. Withdrawing is a way to cope with feeling overwhelmed. But of course, it just makes communication impossible.
It's a vicious cycle. So all these negative patterns, if they keep happening, they can really damage your relationship.
They can. And Gottman calls this downward spiral the distance and isolation cascade.
Doesn't sound good.
It's not. It starts with unresolved conflict, the 4 horsemen doing their damage. Positive interactions decrease, the emotional bank account gets depleted.
So they start drifting apart?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Less intimacy, less communication, less shared activities. They might be physically together, but emotionally they're miles apart.
And this leads to what? Separation, divorce?
Often, yes.
Yeah.
It's a sad process, really, to see that connection erode over time.
So just to recap for everyone listening, the biggest warning signs are lots of those 4 horsemen, way more negative interactions than positive ones, frequent flooding during arguments, and a lack of shared goals, values, that kind of thing.
That's a great summary. And remember, these factors often work together. If there's a lot of contempt, the 5 to 1 ratio is probably way off too.
It all connects. Now, Gottman also found some differences between men and women in how these patterns show up, didn't he?
Yeah, so interesting trends. Men are more likely to stonewall. Women are more likely to criticize.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important to remember, these are just tendencies, not rules.
Right, everyone's different.
Exactly. And these tendencies might come from, how we're raised, how we learn to communicate, maybe even some biological differences in how our brains work.
Fascinating. So it's about being aware of these patterns in ourselves and our partners, not about blaming or stereotyping.
Absolutely. And this is where repair attempts come in.
You mentioned these before. What are they exactly? Why are they so important?
It's anything you do to try to de-escalate an argument, to stop it from getting worse.
Okay, like what? Give me some examples.
It could be saying, hey, let's take a break and come back to this later.
Mhm.
Or using humor, or apologizing for something you said. Even a touch on the arm can be a repair attempt.
So it's like hitting pause on the negativity, trying to get back on track.
Exactly. And both people need to be willing to do this, to offer repairs and to accept them when they're offered.
It shows you still care,
Yeah.
right? Even when you're fighting.
It does. It says we can work through this. And good couples are usually pretty good at this repair stuff. It's a skill you can learn.
And finally, Gottman talks about the role of shared meaning in relationships. What's that all about?
It's about more than just liking the same movies or hobbies. It's about having a deeper sense of purpose together, shared values, dreams for the future.
Okay, so it's deeper than just enjoying the same things.
Way deeper. It's about building a life together that has meaning for both of you. shared goals, family traditions, even just agreeing on what's important in life.
So you're on the same page, going in the same direction.
Exactly. And this shared meaning, it gives you a strong foundation to face challenges, to support each other through tough times.
Makes sense. So we've covered a lot today. This deep dive into Gottman's work has been pretty eye-opening.
It's amazing how much we can learn from simply observing couples, really paying attention to how they interact.
So for everyone listening, what can you take away from all this? How can you use these insights in your own relationships?
Well, just knowing about the four horsemen is a good start. You can start to spot them in your own conversations or even in other people's relationships.
Awareness is key.
It is. And the emotional bank account idea, that's huge.
Yeah.
Remember to make those deposits, those small acts of kindness and love.
Right, it all adds up.
And pay attention to those bids for connection. Make an effort to turn toward your partner, your friends, your family.
Be present, be responsive, even in the little moments.
Exactly. And that 5-to-1 ratio, keep that in mind. It's not about never arguing. It's about making sure the good outweighs the bad.
Focus on the positive.
And remember that conflict is normal. It's how you handle it that matters. Those repair attempts, they're crucial.
And in the long run, building a shared sense of meaning, having those deeper connections, that's what really makes a relationship last.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right, let's wrap things up for our listeners. Today's deep dive into what predicts divorce has given us a lot to think about. We've explored the dangers of those four horsemen, the importance of that emotional bank account, those bids for connection, the magic 5-to-1 ratio.
And don't forget flooding, the distance and isolation cascade, repair attempts, all those key concepts.
Right, it's all connected. Understanding these things can really help you assess your own relationships, where they're strong and where they might need some work.
It's like a roadmap to a healthier, happier relationship.
So as we end, I want to ask our listeners a question. What's one small change you can make today in one of your relationships based on what we've discussed?
Maybe it's softening your tone when you're frustrated, noticing when someone's trying to connect with you, or simply doing something kind for someone you care about.
Those small changes over time, they can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. Taking the time to think about this, to make even one small improvement, that's a great step towards building stronger, more fulfilling relationships.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it valuable, something to really think about and apply to your own life.